Hello there.
Hey.
Because I don't have an introducer, let me introduce myself. My name is Carla Howell. I'm the Executive Director for the National Libertarian Party of DC. And my background coming into this was that I have been a libertarian, active libertarian since 1996. I ran 3 times for office. I ran for state auditor in 1998 in Massachusetts and got the endorsement of the Boston Herald and got enough votes to give the party major party status. In 2000, I ran for U.S. Senate against Ted Kennedy and a Republican, and I believe I still have the record for the highest vote total in a 3-way race against a Democratic Republican. I got 12% of the vote in that race. A very active campaign involving, I think we had 700 volunteers at one point, yard signs all over the state. 2002, I ran for governor against Mitt Romney, the Democrat, and some other third parties. And also ran the first of 3 statewide ballot initiatives. That was to end the state income tax. And it shocked the political establishment when we got 45% of the vote. Subsequently, we ran 2 more, one in 2008 to end the income tax, one in 2010 to roll back the sales tax, cut it in half. Each got close to 1 million votes. The second 2 times, the teachers union figured out that they couldn't just sit on their laurels. They had to fight us because these ideas were too popular. So they spent $12 million to make sure our poll numbers went down, and we didn't have the money to respond to that. But we created quite a stir, and we created, we were the talking point. We were the biggest issue in the 2010 election and in the 2008 elections in Massachusetts. There was no issue that was more talked about than our proposals to dramatically downsize the state government in Massachusetts and cut taxes substantially. So, what we're doing today here is a game called Who's Driving, and it's designed to fulfill several purposes. One of its purposes, and by the way, you don't need to take notes because this is pretty much all at the website lp.org. If you look under where it says action, play Who's Driving, everything's there, so you can just look it up there on the website. The purpose of this is several. Generally, it's to make us better spokespersons, far more effective communicators, so that when we do get on the ballot, and when we do get that media interview, and we do have that money to create a yard sign or a bumper sticker, or write an ad, or do direct mail, that our message is as powerful as possible. So it is memorable, powerful, libertarian, and provides benefits that speak to the everyday voter. One of the unique benefits of the Libertarian Party is we're the real evangelical wing of the liberty movement. Most of the think tanks in this movement have their roots in the Libertarian Party. Cato, a bunch of other ones. They started from campaigns, and this is where a lot of people learn about the Libertarian Party. So we have an opportunity to bring in people who aren't already libertarian. Soccer moms, Joe Sixpack, retired senior on a fixed income. That's who we have the potential to bring in. Ron Paul, Young, everybody, okay? So this is our huge opportunity. We don't want to blow it. We want to use every minute to its maximum. And this is what I call the foundation of a libertarian campaign. You know, some say, well, first you have to have a candidate or a ballot initiative. But what you have to have upon which everything else is built is a message that speaks to people and speaks to their interest. So we have to be speaking to, not in terms of the Constitution or U.S. history or a lot of details about how government works, because most people don't care. They don't know enough to really understand. And above all, we don't have time. There isn't time. And having done hundreds of media interviews and dozens of live TV and radio debates and hundreds of print interviews, I guarantee you have very little time. They will edit what you say, and they will bone it down to whatever soundbite they might let out the door. The more consistently we can speak powerfully and effectively and get our message out in a memorable way, the better chance that when it gets through all that filtering, everyday voter is going to hear it. And hopefully what he hears is, that looks good to me. I want what that candidate is offering. That's what we want to do. Now, another piece of background here is, what are we speaking into? What's the listening that we're speaking into? We're speaking into a listening that I call big government. what everybody hears all day is more taxes, more gun regulations, more business regulations, more foreign meddling, more government spending, above all. And they just keep jacking up government spending to the beyond the stratosphere. I mean, there's hardly words for what they're doing, right? If you pick up any newspaper, I saw people reading the Wall Street Journal, you go to any major city newspaper and try this. Read and look for how many times you can find a discussion about a proposal for more big government in that newspaper. What would you guess in the typical daily newspaper in a major city? How many times would you guess there was a mention or a discussion about a proposal for more big government? In what, 10?
10, yeah.
Could be 10, could be 20, could be 30. I'd say 10 at least is usually what you'll find. How many discussions of less government will you find?
Almost none.
None.
Unless there's a letter to the editor.
Yeah, unless, yeah.
There's a complete vacuum of discussion about less government. And about the only chance to get that out there is through our libertarian campaigns. Ballot initiatives is another way. But our libertarian campaigns. How many have run for office? How many people noticed when you ran for office that the friends and people you knew who you preached libertarianism to forever suddenly really were interested in what you had to say when you became a candidate? Have you noticed that?
Oh, yeah.
You haven't noticed that, Aaron?
So long ago.
Okay. Most candidates I talk to, and certainly my experience is when you're a candidate, even if you're a third party and people don't think libertarians can win and all that stuff, you say you're a candidate, and all of a sudden they start asking questions, what's your opinion? Okay? So we are the messenger. We are the organization that's providing less government. Now you look at think tanks, libertarian think tanks, and they're a wonderful resource for analyzing big government and knowing what's wrong with it, and for us to have powerful talking points. So it's a good thing as a candidate to have that background information. But when you look at the conclusions they draw, they usually say things like, after completely proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that this government agency is a complete waste of money and actually doing damage, their conclusion will be, we need to rethink whether or not we should maybe reform this, you know. And part of this is because there's 501c3 and they're not allowed to, you know, there's kind of this area where they're not supposed to be directly advocating for changing policy. But they just don't. For whatever reason, they don't. The people, the organization that can deliver this message is libertarian candidates running for office. And so the foundation of a campaign is your libertarian solutions that shrink government and that present a specific proposal that is of benefit to the everyday voter. Translating, in other words, presenting our libertarian agenda in an attractive way that everyday voters will actually say, I might vote for that, or I might actually go to the polls for that. Now, one of the things you want to do, one of the things our opponents do, is they're constantly putting out big government proposals. It's like they say, throwing spaghetti on a wall and see what sticks. Like Obama with his latest gun, we're going to have background checks. What were some of the things that he was proposing in there? Magazines, right? And
bullet types,
no,
restrictions.
Assault, bring back the assault weapons, and just throw it out there and maybe something will stick. Hopefully that one's going to go down in flames. But Obamacare is still on the books. The several trillion, or 600 billion in 1 year, more like 660 billion, that they increase taxes on New Year's Day, and then they increase again with the internet sales tax. They get enough of this passed that they are forever expanding government. They are driving. Big government is driving the conversation.
Yes.
We are not. Most libertarians, when you go to their websites, you will see a dearth of specific libertarian proposals, especially that are in the context of the authority that that candidate has. They're a state legislative candidate. What can they do with state government? They're a city council candidate. How can they shrink government within the authority of that office? School committee member, federal candidate, state board member, whatever it is. The question to ask is, what can they do? How can they use that authority to create less government authority, to shrink government? So the examples that I sent around are just ideas. And we welcome more, and hopefully we'll get lots and lots and lots and lots of ideas that we can be playing with and experimenting with. And what we're going to do here today is play the game Who's Driving It. And it's going to involve all of you. It's going to involve two people who volunteer to come in front of the room, and hopefully a few of you will do that. And the rest of you will also participate. The way it's going to go is this. So, this is the game Who's Driving It. Now,
Please, if the other one.
Now, what we're going to do here, the purpose of this game is simply to exercise our muscle in learning how to take the steering wheel and to be the one driving. And to just demand that we're going to be talking about less government. We're not talking about more government, we're talking about less. We're grabbing the steering wheel. Okay? Now, to play the game, if you were to play it 10 or 20 times and get really good at it, there'd be a lot more to it, and you'd learn to do a lot of preparation. To some degree, because of the necessity of we're going to just jump in and play, I'm going to ask you to do something that you're not prepared to do. I'm going to ask you, if you're the Libertarian interviewee sitting here, and there's going to be an interviewer asking you questions, to come up with a proposal that you're going to talk about. Now, the way you would really do it if you were a candidate is you would research. You would know the financial numbers behind it. You know how much government is spending. You know who has what authorities. You know how they're spending that money. You know a lot about the impact that it's having. You might know which Democrats and Republicans caused it to be put into law, who voted for it, so you can attack them for having created the mess in the first place. And you will have thought through what the benefits are to actually removing some area of government that you're going to propose. So, for example, if your proposal, there's only 3 copies here for now. These are just some samples. There's also one sheet that says benefits. Who has that one right now? If I may take that down. Excuse me. So, for example, if you're selling the idea of ending the war on drugs, what are some of the benefits? Reduce crime. Huge benefit. And this is especially a good one to diffuse the people who kind of aren't really comfortable with the idea of legalizing drugs. Everybody's comfortable with the idea of less crime. You could also reference Mexico and stopping the spree of horrendous violence going on south of the border. You can stop ruining kids' lives in their careers, their college admission, their future employment because of they smoke a joint one day or get caught somehow. You can allow those suffering from debilitating diseases such as cancer, AIDS, migraines, glaucoma, and other serious disease from stop their suffering due to the fact that they're being prohibited from having a drug that is very effective for these diseases in many cases. And you allow them to do it safely and with dignity. You can make it safe for drug addicts to come out of the closet and get help. You can stop sending the message of hypocrisy, injustice, and defending failed government programs and replace it with a message of self-responsibility, workability, compassion, and justice. You notice how they're always saying, we got to send the right message, that's why we can't repeal the war on drugs. Well, the message they're sending is one of hypocrisy, injustice, insanity, basically. And the correct message to send and to teach kids to be responsible is one of justice, compassion, workability, and self-responsibility. And that's the message we send when we end a failed prohibition. Now, these are some benefits that have been worked up by a lot of people over a lot of time. You're not going to have time for that, okay? So I'm going to be asking those of you who play the game to, and for every one of you here, to just be very understanding that this is kind of like saying, here's your homework assignment, the pop quiz begins in a minute. All right, so we have to know that. We don't in real life want to be unprepared, but for the purpose of this game, we're going to give people a bye if they come up with things that don't really make sense, or they didn't get their numbers right. And I'm even going to say to you, make up the numbers for now if you don't have them, because this is just practice. And for that reason, I've asked our kind videographer and our kind volunteer who offered to help him. Where is he? Is he still here? Did he leave? He's not here. Okay. I had asked him to turn off the video camera while people are actually playing the game. Because if you're a candidate, you don't want video out there with something stupid coming out of your mouth that someone could use to slander you. So we will turn off the video unless you specifically say it's okay and you're never playing to run or whatever. Okay. So So what you'll want to do, there'll be an interviewer sitting here and a Libertarian interviewee sitting here, and the interviewer will ask typical questions that the media proposes. And I have a list of them here, so you don't have to think of what they are. Things like sample interview questions. Why are you running for office? Why don't you run as a Republican or Democrat? How much money will your campaign raise? How did you become a Libertarian? The government is already looking at a budget shortfall. Won't your proposal just make things worse? There's so many. Do you think you have any chance of winning? Why don't you run as a Republican? Do you have any experience in government? There's all kinds of questions, okay, that you can pretty much anticipate you may get in an interview if you're going to be a candidate. And this is just a cheat sheet, if you will. So for the person interviewing, you can just pick from some of these and ask you questions. All right?
Can we get copies of those too, please? Or that's on the website?
I'll have one up here for the
No, but
person.
I mean we can take all. That's on the website,
It's on the website.
the sample.
All the samples are on the website.
Perfect.
You don't need to worry about getting copies. But I'll have some for today and tomorrow. There's our guy who can turn on and off the video. Okay. There's also a cheat sheet here for the one being interviewed, which is called sample segs. Some people call it segues, or what I call redirects. So what I have found in my media interviews is very common, is the questions they ask are designed to keep us stuck in a big government paradigm. Oh, how are we going to fix our ailing schools, and don't the schools need more money, and we have to close the gap of the budget shortfall that we have, and on. Questions designed to assume big government will stay big, okay? And some of these are deliberately made to be difficult to answer. Segs are ways you can redirect the conversation. For example, that's interesting, but I'm running for office in order to boom, and just go on to your point. Or, your question is interesting, but in talking to voters in my district, I found that they're much more concerned about boom. Or, what you said assumes some big government assumption, but big government is actually making things worse. What we need is a small government solution, such as boom, launch into your proposal. Your goal is to grab the steering wheel at every minute of the interview. Go for 100% of the time. Now, if you're actually in a real life situation, you might do it 80% of the time, and that would be great, because to some degree, you want to be building rapport. If you're on a radio, talking to a radio host, you don't want to sound wacky and weird, but you do want to really go after grabbing that steering wheel. So what we're going to do is this. Everybody in the audience will have a pair of cards. One that says Liberty, and one red and blue that says Big Government. And each of you has a job that while the person is being interviewed, you are to hold up one of two cards to give that person visual feedback as to whether they're driving or Big Government is driving. Okay? So, if you would pass these around, take one pair each. We'll need a few more of these. And I will need to get all these back.
Easy, right?
One each.
And that's one of each color, not one,
Yeah. I'm sorry, there are two different cards, so you don't have to worry about which side is showing. Now this is you actually have a much harder role than it may appear. Because the tendency will be that if the Libertarian says something really cool, you're going to go, ooh, yeah, yellow, I like that. But in fact, he or she may not have been driving. And typically where this comes up is if you get sort of off into a debate about big government, and the Libertarian is saying, the big government does this wrong, and big government does that wrong, and big government does that wrong, and it is all about big government. You're talking about an existing big government program, right? You're not putting on the table, and my proposal is to eliminate that and replace it with private charity, volunteer, blah, 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 whatever your proposal is, okay? So you have to be very rigorous as an audience member to be listening and constantly asking your question, asking yourself this question. Is the conversation right now about less government, or is it about more government? And if it's about less government, the gold goes up. If it's not, and if that means, if it gets off into some other subject, like, how did you become a Libertarian? Well, for first in high school this happened and my parents were this way, and 5 minutes get blown with you giving your life history about how you became a libertarian. It might be interesting, it might be inspiring, but never did you take control of the steering wheel by putting out a proposal for less government. And every minute we're doing that, our opponents are driving more taxes, more spending, more regulation, more foreign meddling. That's why we need to get our proposals out there. It's designed to discipline us, to recognize that we are not doing this and we need to do it a lot more, and we need to do it much more persuasively. Okay? So, and this will be tough, and I will tell you, even myself, there's times you're kind of like, well, he put a proposal out there, but now, are they still talking about that? They kind of got off on some other subject, and I don't know which card to put up. And after a while, if you're not sure, hold up the red one. Because if it's not clear in your mind, if you're not getting that voter to be thinking about, what would it be like if we didn't have an income tax? What would it be like if we cut property taxes 25%? We want them to be thinking about this as a possibility. We want to be creating new possibility. If that interviewer isn't creating that possibility, then they're not driving, they're not in control. Got it? Okay. So, any questions about how this will be played? Who has a smartphone with a timer on it? You can time 4-minute segments. If you would please do that. So we'll do 4 minutes each. And what I need then is for 2 volunteers. Now, are you willing to be interviewee or interviewer?
I'd be willing to be the candidate or the interviewer.
Okay, why don't we start, just to give people a demo here. You'll be the interviewer of me,
Okay.
and I'm going to use this to coach you guys in the holding up of cards. Now, I will want one set myself. Do we have extras?
Yeah, they're right there.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Now, get you your sample questions, so you can read over those and pick ones that you want to ask. And what we'll do to start things off is the interviewer will state what we're going to just pretend we're candidates. By the way, this can also apply to a spokesperson, right? You could be a state chair making a statement to the press. But for simplicity, let's assume we're all going to be candidates. State what you're running for, what level of office, and what your proposal is going to be. Okay? So I'm going to be running as a governor of Massachusetts to end the state income tax. And timer ready?
Carla, I apologize, I'm still trying to find it. This is a new iPhone.
I have one if you don't. So
I can do it.
You can do it?
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, then I'll see to you.
Will it make a noise when 4 minutes are up, or will you be needing to pay attention to it?
I can have it make a noise
That's best, because sometimes people forget.
and get involved in the thing.
Yeah.
Okay, you just need 1 minute?
4.
4 minutes.
All right, are we starting?
Go ahead.
Carla, you're running for governor. Why don't you, as a libertarian, why don't you run as a Republican or Democrat?
Well, the Republicans, they say they're fiscally conservative, but, they really aren't. I mean, Governor Cellucci helped to pass this major anti-gun law, and the Republican candidate Baker, he really isn't. He says he's for cutting taxes, but he's not really going to do that. And and the Democrats say they're for civil liberties, but look at Obama. I mean, they betray what they say they're for, and they're not really doing what their constituency expects of them. So I find the only party that's really principled is the Libertarian Party, and that's why I'm running as a Libertarian.
What is your primary issue?
Well, my primary issue is to end the state income tax. The income tax now takes $12 billion out of the pockets of 3 million taxpayers in our state and puts it in government coffers. And what does it do? It wastes a lot of money. If we end the income tax immediately, the state, by the way, it will still have $50 billion to spend, way more than it needs. We'll be able to give back $3,000 each to 3 million workers and taxpayers in our state. $3,000 every year that they can use to save, spend, or give away as they see fit. It will be a tremendous boon for economic growth in our Commonwealth because it will inspire tens of millions of dollars in investment, mostly in small business, where job creation happens. It will create new jobs.
Where do you expect to get support?
Well, that's a good question. I don't have much support because the Republicans in this state say that they're for cutting taxes, but all the candidates are afraid to get behind it. Now, we've got Michael Graham and Citizens for Limited Taxation and a few other groups who have endorsed it. But most people are against it because most of the people in the political establishment want more government.
Has anyone endorsed you?
Well, Citizens for Limited Taxation has said that they support this measure.
Will there be anything else besides that that you would want passed if you were elected as a Libertarian governor?
This is my main issue. I'm generally for small government across the board, but I'm for ending the income tax, and that is why I'm running. Because not only do we need to create jobs, not only do we need to cut government waste, not only do people need more money in their budget, but in their family budgets, but government fuels all the other failed government programs. If you look in your phone book in the blue pages at the 500 different programs that are out there, big government is not accountable for any of these. I mean, you probably haven't heard of most of the things that government's doing. And so we need to get rid of them because they're not accountable to anybody. They're wasting money, and the private sector can do them much better. So the answer to the question is, I'm for cutting government across the board, but why I'm running is to end the income tax immediately.
Will you be doing any advertising?
If you want to donate to end the income tax, we would love to run ads, and we encourage you to go to our website and donate to end the income tax because it's not going to happen without your support.
What do you do for a living?
Right now, I'm running for governor to end the income tax. I've been in the private sector for 22 years. Okay. All right, thank you. Now, what you can do, and I wasn't being too aggressive here. I've seen some people play this game who really do a good job, who will not let a word come out of their mouth that aren't in the income tax. Not a word. Let's just try that for 1 minute and try to ask me some really tough questions.
What will happen to all the government workers when there's no income tax to support them?
There will be twice as many private sector jobs when we end the income tax as the number of government jobs that are lost through layoffs, through downsizing. A boom for the economy. A panacea for the job seeker. So every government worker who wants a job, there's going to be jobs out there for them if they're willing to work.
Do you think any government elected official should be as a volunteer or should be paid?
If we end the income tax, we can look at whether to get rid of legislative pay. That may be one way to cut government. There's thousands of ways to cut government. I don't think that's the top choice because it's just not enough money. We have to go after the programs that are wasting tons of money, like bureaucracies within the healthcare. I mean, the connectors and all these crazy things that Romney set up. They're wasting tons of money. We can get rid of those. We can make government smaller. So, and I've seen it even more aggressive than that. Thank you for the time. So, you get the idea? Do you have any questions?
Do you or do you not recommend the being aggressive?
For the purposes of this game, experiment however you want. In a real live interview, you don't want to come across as a jerk. In a real live interview, you may adjust your speaking according to who you're talking to. If you're on NPR, they like to talk like this. You might not want to be too high-pitched, but if you've got a radio host who's really high-pitched, blah, 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 you might kind of join in there with their, and build rapport. It's going to be up to your own personal style. I don't think there's any one answer to that question. And everybody's got a certain comfort level with the way that they communicate. But for the purposes of and I've seen people play this game. I've seen people play this game who are really aggressive, interrupting, wow, crazy. And I've seen a guy who's just measured and polite, and he won't let go of that steering wheel. It's not necessarily correlated, okay? The idea is grab the steering wheel, okay?
I think one other rule you could apply here is, and this is always used in sales, is tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. So when you're discussing this, try and weave your message so that you begin with something broad. We think ending the income tax will help us to create a greater degree of private city jobs. Within that, we can have a lot more discussion about why cutting taxes will actually increase the tax revenue because it creates more jobs that we then can take these individuals in the workforce who are being laid off from government. And and then close the whole thing up with a comment, and that's why ending the sales tax is so important, because it encourages private citizens to do private jobs that are productive.
Do you have time to do that, though?
Any one of these messages, you should have a 30-second to a 1-minute response, written out ahead of time. I recommend
That's
you videotape yourself, see your facial expressions, and when you're doing the interview itself, I did this with our caucus, record the whole thing, and hope you don't make a mistake, and then after the interview, post it, blog it out there, let everybody see the full answer if they really want to see it.
And I would also recommend having a 10-second, because you need a 10-second soundbite. If you're being interviewed in print media, write it out whenever you can. You do want to prepare. Now, let me just mention one other thing, and this is another part where it gets tricky, is that the general format of an ad for a libertarian solution is kind of like an ad for cancer research or cancer cures, because we're in the business of getting rid of big government, right? This thing that's bad that does damage to people. Freedom isn't this thing that you can tangibly hold, it's the absence of government. So wait, look at a cancer commercial. What's the typical format? You have this sort of dark music at the beginning with the families learn of a diagnosis, and it's this terrible tragedy. And then they're going to the such and such cancer center, and it starts to pick up. And they talk about their lab facilities and blah, 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 solution, solution, solution. And at the end, they walk out, they're going home with the family cured, and the music's bright and happy. So the typical format, pain, problem, solution, benefits, right? And that pain problem includes Democrats, Republicans cause this problem. We want to contrast ourselves with Democrats and Republicans by showing that they're the ones causing the problem, we're the cure. The government is the disease, libertarian is the cure. So you may in the beginning have this negative part because you need to lay out the contrast, but you want to do it really quickly, really quickly. Democrats and Republicans voted for the income tax. I'm voting to get rid of it right now. They want you to keep spending $3,000 every year. I want to give you back $3,000 every year in your family budget to spend, save, give away as you see fit. So we create jobs, blah, 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 blah. Okay? So a brief attack on who created the problem and then into the positive, the solution and the benefits. If you can remember that. It's a lot to remember when you're not used to doing this. But just remember, grab the steering wheel and just make it up if you have to. And you will make mistakes. That's okay. You'll correct them. You'll see them and you'll correct them. So it's okay to make mistakes. Is everybody okay with making mistakes? Is everybody okay with everybody else making mistakes?
Rock on.
Okay, good. So would you like to be the first interviewer?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Do you want me to turn off the camera?
I might do a little coaching here with cards.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are we ready, timer? Now, what are you running for?